Thanks so much, Paul, for the warm introduction, and welcome to everyone who's joined. Just as Paul said, my name's Cadi, and I am our commercial director at Beeswax for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And in terms of what we'll cover today, I know everyone in programmatic just loves an acronym. So I'm really sorry for naming this webinar with a very important TLA or three-letter acronym. I'm hoping by the end of this session, what is actually behind it and why it's so important becomes clear, because what I hope you'll see today is the impact that supply path optimization can have on your programmatic activity. Both in terms of the performance that you see from your campaigns, but also of the costs, which might be a factor of performance, but they might also, it might also just be much more about greater efficiency. But yeah, if you take away one thing, it's not just a bunch of letters from the alphabet. So in terms of where do we start? If we go back to the origins of programmatic, a publisher would work with a single supply side platform. But with time, as programmatic adoption grew, publishers started to work with many more supply side platforms, supply side partners. So effectively, they would have a waterfall style setup. So they would send out their bid request via their first supply side platform, who would have a relatively high bid floor in place. And if the DSP that they were connected to didn't bid at a level that met that floor, then the publisher would pass that bid request to the second SSP and so on through a chain. But at most, you'd really only see 3, perhaps 4 SSP partners at play. And the majority of those bid requests, the majority of the impressions would really be filled by the first supply side platform. And all of the SSPs would sort of vie to be for that sort of premier first look at the supply. What has really changed this and made supply path optimization so crucial has been the switch to header bidding. And this is where this diagram starts to get a little bit more complicated, because as we switch to header bidding, effectively a publisher was able, instead of to have that water flow set up and have to choose their preferred partner at each sort of level and tier of that waterfall, we ended up with a scenario which we're in at the moment, where each publisher can work with 4, 5, 6, maybe 10, maybe even more supply side platforms. They put their SSP codes directly into a wrapper container on the publisher's website. This really gained mass adoption through end of 2016, early 2017. And so now, as a user comes to that publisher website, maybe I've put 5 in this example because I couldn't put 10 on one slide. We'll stick with 5 because it's nice round numbers as well. But maybe more of those supply side platforms will be sending out that bid request. I should say now, we have had a previous webinar that's gone into the life of a bid and what each of these partners do. So if I'm already sounding like I'm speaking made up languages or too many 3-letter acronyms, do refer back to that session that's available in our YouTube channel. I think Paul might even be able to put a link to it in the chat. So in this scenario, imagine a user goes to the publisher's website, the publisher's working with these 5 SSPs, and each, for that single impression, that single ad on that publisher's website, each of those SSPs then sends out a bid request to each DSP. And so for each SSP involved, the demand side platform receives a duplicate bid request, or a triplicate, or a quadruplicate, or a quintuplet. I don't even know, I couldn't even get up to 10, but you get the idea that there's a huge amount of overlap. And that has a lot of bearing on demand side platforms because their cost is generated by the volume of bid requests that they are processing. This is quite a simple example with just one publisher. If we move to the scenario where we have 3 publishers, you can suddenly start to see the complexity is building. In the recent ISBA report into programmatic transparency, they would share that on every campaign, there could be up to 40,000 different publishers included. And with that volume of publishers, you can really clearly start to get a picture on just the huge volume of duplication that's happening, and the additional strain that that's putting on the computational power of the people who are receiving those bid requests. And then in terms of why that's important, well, if you look at those bid requests that are coming in, we're talking about 3 impressions here, 1 from each of the 3 publishers, but that's being multiplied by 5 in this example. And that would mean that the demand side platform was receiving 15 bid requests. But the kind of logic behind that, though, is that there's only actually 3 opportunities that can be won. There's still only 3 ad impressions. And so the DSPs are carrying out this additional processing, but only in this scenario, 1/5 of what they're seeing can actually result in a transaction. And with most DSPs operating on a percentage of media basis, that's really caused a lot of friction in that the volume of processing has gone up hugely, but the volume of transactions they can actually win hasn't really changed. And so what's really starting to happen is that DSPs have been trying to control their costs, and they've started to determine which supply side platform they want to use to access which publisher's inventory. So if I go to the next slide, you might see that the DSP might set up with a certain publisher to only receive in this, so I've still got 3 publishers. So in SSP1 is only going to be sending bid requests from publisher 1 and publisher 2, but ignoring the bid requests from publisher 3 when they're sending them to that particular DSP. Hopefully that makes sense in terms of the sort of what is it as it comes. It's this basis of optimizing when you're seeing publisher inventory, which SSP you are seeing it through. And that might make sense, but what we really want to talk about is it might be particularly pronounced in scenarios where the DSP also owns an SSP, because they obviously have the most to gain if they're trying to push most of the demand through their own platforms. But if we come out of that really specific scenario, why does it matter? Like what ultimately, if programmatic is about reaching the right user in the right place at the right time, supply path optimization matters because there's a risk that it actually could stop you from doing that. It might stop you and interfere with you being able to reach your audience at the time and in the environment that you want to reach them in. So it's worth bearing in mind that the programmatic industry, the programmatic landscape is run on auctions, right? So certain pockets of inventory, the difference between winning or losing the auction could be just, could be I was going to say a penny, but we should stick in programmatic terms. It could be just 1 cent. And therefore, anything that reduces your bid in any way potentially influences your win rate. That's the success rate. When you raise your hand and you respond to a bid request, you want to bid, anything that reduces that bid might impact your likelihood to win the supply that you want. So if we come into more specific scenarios, and I've used in this example the percentages that came out from the ISBA the ISBA Programmatic Transparency Report, where SSP fees varied between 6% and 25%. So in that scenario, let's just say a user's just landed on this publisher website and you really want to access this piece of inventory, whether it's the publisher that's really important or the user, sort of doesn't really matter. They're on your whitelist and you really want to bid for that impression. In this scenario, you can see the bid request from each of the 5 SSPs coming through. But each of those SSPs will have a different commercial agreement with the publisher. Each publisher gets to negotiate their own terms with the company that represents them in market. And given that most publishers want their SSP partners to compete on net revenue rather than gross revenue, so that means the amount once their fees are removed rather than the actual bid that the DSP is submitting, the bids that they're comparing to will take into account those SSP fees. So if we take this example where the demand side platform, you want to bid $5 for this impression, the reduction that might happen when we take into account the SSP fees could make a huge difference in terms of the bid that the publisher is actually seeing. If you see in this example where we're bidding $5, that difference between 6% and 25% means a difference in bids between $3.75 and 4.7. In a scenario where 1 cent can make a difference, you can bet that that's almost a dollar is going to make a huge difference. So you've got to remember that in a scenario where you are bidding to win, the winning bidder is going to win, but it's not necessarily the winning bid that the DSP is placing. It's the winning bid in combination from the DSP and the SSP. So it's worth really digging into supply path optimization because it will dramatically influence your win rate. I have another sort of thing that happens as well. So we talked a little bit about this because quite a few DSPs have some kind of skin in the game on the supply side, platforms side. It might be specifically that they are owned by the same parent company. It might be that they have some kind of unofficial commitments in place whereby they try to prioritize particular partners. So where that is the case, they might ensure that their setup helps to maximize a relationship with a particular SSP. So remember, obviously in this scenario with header bidding, the demand side platform is receiving the bid request from all of the different SSPs. But if the DSP has throttled supply in some way, so if these other lines were to be grayed out and they weren't seeing that bid request, they might respond via this bid request, which would still be a good bid, but there's potentially some kind of conflict of interest. And DSPs might be doing this purely to manage cost, but it can still limit your access to those bid requests, and your bid response, your bid that you're putting into the auction might become less valuable, less competitive as a result of this. And so a lot of platforms will talk about their supply path optimization strategy, but really, unless it's being done to maximize your results, unless it's being done by you, the advertiser, there could be other things at stake that mean it's not necessarily being done in your interest. And so it's always worth investigating if that's something that is happening. There is one other area I wanted to touch on, and it came up when I was in conversation recently with a German publisher. But DSPs often throttle their supply to manage their costs, and similarly, publishers might not want to release all of their inventory to particular supply side platforms, so they might pick and choose who they make what inventory, what of their supply accessible to which SSP or DSP. So in some scenarios, you might see that if lots of the customers of a particular demand side platform really were buying a lot and were bidding very frequently on publishers 1 and 2, but they weren't really bidding a lot on publisher 3, then the demand side platform might request of the SSPs that they don't send so much inventory from publisher number 3. Or publisher 3 might even say, well, we don't want you to make this available. And so in that scenario where the DSP has said, can you turn down our level of volume of bid requests we're seeing from publisher 3, that might work fine for the bulk of that DSP's customer. But what you might see if you're the exception, or if you really care about a particular user group, that might even limit your reach to the target audience that you're really trying to connect with. So it's often kind of unclear what buyers can do to improve their access to different types of supply. And that's really what I want to talk about in the next few slides, just to cover off what you can do to improve your access to the inventory that you care about the most, and to ensure that you are bidding in a way that is optimizing for your best interests and not the best interests for other parties involved. So in terms of what that might look like, well, I have to say there's been a huge amount of coverage of this, of the benefits of log level data recently, but supply path optimization really begins with access to log level data. Log level data are the files that track the bid requests and the bid responses that are happening in real time to enable programmatic advertising. And there are lots of different levels of log level data. Most DSPs, no matter who you're working with, should accept to share with you win logs. A win log is, we receive a bid request, so the DSP receives a bid request, the DSP bids on your behalf for that bid request, you win the impression, and you serve your ad in that space. So that win log will help you to understand, in a scenario where you have won, who have you won from and what was your bid. But to get more under the, we say bonnet in the UK, if we have any Americans dial in, to get under the hood of the vehicle, you might need to understand more information in that, and push for greater access to different types of log files. We see a lot of our customers asking for access for loss logs. And a loss log can be used to determine, I bid on this impression, on this auction, and I lost. Why did I lose? And you can start to understand why you lost and what went into that decisioning. Going up a level again into, sticking with the supply path optimization use case, really understanding your bid logs together with your loss logs. So where did you bid and where did you lose? Because perhaps you did bid multiple times for that bid request, and how did those different exchanges react? So you can look at the win rate that you see for a particular publisher, for a particular domain, and perhaps it's always higher through one particular SSP partner than it is through another. And in that scenario, you might ask your DSP partner to optimize your setup so that when you see bid requests from that particular publisher, you have them sent via the SSP where you're seeing better win rates and therefore better responses. The other piece with auction logs to bid logs is that you can start to get an understanding of where are these auctions actually available, through which partners are they available, and therefore, you know, if you want to really understand, I think this is actually the question on the next slide, which auctions are you actually bidding on and why can't you win more of them, then looking at that combination of auction logs and bid logs will really help you to decipher what's going on there and how you can set that up for success. It will help you to answer these questions and really start to understand maybe what optimizations are going on behind the scenes that you might not be aware of. It sounds like I know there's a sort of assumption that log level data is complex, and I think Paul and I might touch on that and discuss that in another minute, because it doesn't have to be. I think it can be as complicated as you like, but what you're really looking at is a block of transactions, and you're looking to see, well, you know, have you put these transactions through in the best way for you? Just as if you were an economical shopper and you really wanted to buy a particular brand of produce, right? Paul commented on the fruit that's behind me. If you really wanted a particular brand of bananas, you might compare the cost of buying those same produce from the same manufacturer through Tesco's or through Sainsbury's or through Waitrose. Effectively, supply path optimization is allowing you to do exactly that. What is the best route? Who are the best partners for you to transact with if this is the inventory that is most valuable to you? The other recommendation that we have very strongly at Beeswax is to enter into direct relationships with the exchange partners, with the SSPs. I think the traditional sort of relationship is this top one where the DSP acts as the clearinghouse. At the end of each month, each of the SSPs send a bill to the DSP tots it all up, splits it up based on all of their different customers and sends the right bill to their customers. The DSP effectively operates as the clearinghouse and is the middleman between you, the advertiser, and the supply side platform. What we strongly encourage our customers here at Beeswax to do is to enter into direct relationships with the SSP. So while Beeswax handles all of the actual day-to-day bid request, bid response processing, at the end of each month, each of the SSP partners actually sends some of our customers the bill for their spend on that platform. And that has real advantage in terms of having a direct relationship with the exchange. You can potentially negotiate your own terms, and there are examples of agencies and advertisers doing that, whether that's in terms of transparency and greater access to further log level data from the supply side, or whether that's in terms of the actual transacting terms that can happen, and that are doing that bid reduction. So there are lots and lots of different elements and reasons why you might want to consider having a direct relationship, particularly with the exchange partners that you are buying from the most. And so with that, I know we've had a few questions come through already, but Paul, I said we would talk about the log level data, because it's something that comes up time and time again when we're talking to customers, just how hard it can be, because they can be significant volumes of data. And I think historically, we would have shipped those to customers either in batches or in real time to an Amazon S3 bucket. And so that's always required them to have some level of DevOps or sort of software engineering, some level of technical engineering resource to host them and to start to process those log files, to make sure that then they are accessible and queryable by the team. But we've just obviously launched Antenna, a Beeswax product, which effectively takes care of that engineering and hosting effort for our customers. But I think is there a session coming up on this soon?
There is. So tomorrow at the same time.
Very soon.
If you'd like to join us. I'll send out the link to that just now.
It was this week. I didn't know it was actually tomorrow.
It's almost as if we had this planned. We do have a session tomorrow where an actual customer of ours is going to be talking about how they use transaction level data and how they use Antenna to make that a snap. Without any ETL, without the DevOps, without any of that stuff, you can get access instantly to the expanded set of log files you get access to when you work with Beeswax. So I sent that out, and I hope you do sign up. It should be an informative session. That one's going to be an hour. And for now, though, let's go to the Q&A and let's answer some questions about supply path optimization. So the first question, does the reporting UI of Beeswax allow to see the SSP fees while pulling a vendor or app/URL/domain report?
Oh goodness! Could you go through that once more time? Just repeat that once more. That's
does
not
the reporting
in there.
UI does the reporting UI on Beeswax allow us, the user, to see the SSP fees while pulling a vendor or app/URL/domain report?
So that is a really good question. No, it doesn't allow you to necessarily see those. I'm not sure who is asking the question. So the only exception would be if you were the publisher and you had access to the SSP, you could obviously audit that way and check that what we were bidding was reaching you correctly. And we do have some relationships where we work with publishers. No, in that sort of scenario, there are tests, assuming that you're not the publisher, there are tests that you could set up whereby you set up to bid on particular SSP publisher combinations in different ways, and through that way you could start to see what price you're clearing at through different SSP partners, and you could start to make an educated guess at those fees, or at least certainly at the best path to accessing those fees. So if you're an existing Beeswax customer, you should definitely speak to your customer success manager, your account manager, about that sort of setup. And if you reference this SPO session, we can definitely follow up on how you might set up that test. If you're someone who we're not currently working with, then I think I even have my details on the next slide. So please do shoot me an email, send something over to me, and I'd love to just talk through how you might structure a test like that.
Okay. Next question, does Beeswax support path-based bidding?
Yes, absolutely. And it's something that comes up a lot. We talk to a lot of brands who do a huge amount of optimization based on the domain and are generally very frustrated that they haven't been able to do that through other partners. But yes, in Beeswax, you can set up the combination of by publisher X through this SSP, but instead prioritizes this other publisher through this other SSP, so that you can really get quite granular with how you're responding, and you could set that up as hard and fast rules, or you could set it up with modifiers also. So effectively, if you did want to see all of the bid requests for the same publisher via different SSPs, you could then adjust the bid with a multiplier multiplier based on the path and how that works. Most people,
Okay.
it's not so much for tongue twister.
All right, next
Great
question.
questions. I'm loving these.
Yeah, there's quite a few more. So let's power through. How does an exchange fit into SPO?
Oh, that's a good question. I've tried to keep it quite simple through this presentation, and making effectively thinking about the SSP as running that exchange-based transaction. I think that's probably where we see the biggest impact, rather than going into too much detail. I think it's where you can see where the SSP fees vary so extremely. That 6 to 25% take rate, it just blew my mind when the ISMA report came out, and so I think that's where there is more margin for optimization than perhaps at the exchange level. But I'd be really happy to pick this up offline as well.
Sure. Okay, and the next question, first a statement. Hi, and this is wonderful. Have you studied the tag latency when reseller SSPs daisy chain the inventory multiple times? Example, using Evidon, there are latencies of 900 milliseconds. How would that even work within our 200 millisecond auction? Would this indicate the ad may not even be viewed if the user lands and then scrolls before 900 milliseconds is up?
It's possible that would happen. It's possible that we wouldn't be able to respond to the auction in time, or that the SSP would disregard our bid with that kind of level of latency. It's not something I've personally studied in great detail yet, but I'm pretty sure that someone else in Beeswax has. I can think of a couple of our product team who have really gone into detail on this. So let's follow up on this one. And Paul, I can't see the names again. I've done whatever.
Yeah, no, and by the way,
I'm hoping you can set this up so we can follow up.
when you ask questions in these webinars, I tend not to call out the names just because I'm not certain who wants to put their name out there. But we do get a report at the end, so if there's anything that requires a more intricate follow up, then we're able to pass that along to the correct member on the team who's able to give you a more in-depth answer based on their area of expertise. So I'll move on to the next question. Are there any technologies out there that allow cross DSP, cross SSP validation, and log level transparency?
So cross SSP validation. Was that the first part of the question?
Yeah. Are there any technologies out there that allow cross DSP, cross SSP validation, and log level transparency?
I believe that there are a number of folks working towards this space. We've done some work and had a number of conversations with various teams in this space. I think this is referring to the sort of work that AminoPay might be doing, also Fiducia. There's a few companies kind of getting into this space. And I think for brands who have very, very complex setups, working with multiple partners and multiple agencies, it's a really good thing to start to dig into and to have a partner to support on. What I would say is, if you're maybe not a FTSE 100 or NASDAQ listed company, and your setup is not particularly complex, the Beeswax model, where we transact on fixed fee basis on a SaaS model and not a percentage of media, kind of takes away a lot of the burden for that, especially where we are giving access to log level data, taking away the need for DevOps, so you can just literally query it in real time through a user interface. I think some of the technology is great and adds a huge amount of value. I'm not certain that it's really necessary for everyone myself, but then it depends a lot on the partners that you're working with. I think if you're working purely with fixed fee partners, then some of that becomes less applicable.
All right, and if I say this is the last question, that usually prompts one final question to come in. So please submit your questions now if you'd like them to be answered. Oh, there it is. So I'll put this one before the last question. What value do SSPs and exchanges provide beyond scale? Is it possible to bypass them and connect directly to publishers and publisher groups?
Oh, that is an interesting question. So yes, potentially. Some publisher groups, publisher alliances have actually created their own header wrapper, effectively almost their own SSP, their own thing that sends us a bid request, which is what we need to be able to respond to. And in that sort of scenario, then it's entirely possible to bypass them, but that is definitely not the majority of publishers at the moment, and they do really still provide a valuable service in terms of the whole internet and the whole supply, versus as a DSP having to go out and connect to each individual publisher's solution would be really quite onerous. It would be a huge amount of work. So I think it's worth watching. I feel like I'm one of those TV episodes where I keep referring to previous episodes.
Sure.
But we did a webinar recently with the Ozone Project, who have built out some of their own supply side technology, and it might be worth checking back on that session just to hear a little bit about how they've done that.
I will go ahead and paste that into the chat right now. Ozone.
But just as I think, most people should want a fully customizable DSP, and absolutely no one who's not in ad tech should build one.
Sure.
I think the same goes for the supply side as well. Absolutely every publisher should demand transparency and should demand a relationship with a platform that works for them. But we've seen very few very few publishers actually successfully build out their own supply side tech. I think the Washington Post have done some work in that regard in the US, and there are a few publishers here through Europe, UK, Germany that have, but it's definitely, if it's not your core area of focus. What is quite interesting are companies who effectively license that technology on SaaS models, and that's something that's increasingly occurring. There's AdLive in France, which offers that sort of solution on a SaaS basis. Adhees out of the Netherlands have a similar kind of setup, and that can be a really nice sort of halfway house, giving that full transparency of fixed fees, but without having to actually build it.
Yeah. Next question. We spend a lot of time optimizing by URL and notice significant performance differences on the same domain via different SSPs. Does Beeswax allow us to control the SSP publisher combination in our bidding?
Yes, actually, this is really similar to the earlier question, and it does come up. It comes up a huge amount with performance-focused advertisers, because there really can be a huge amount of difference, and there are perhaps two drivers for this. One might be that a publisher might only release certain types of their inventory via a particular SSP, and that's not really something that you can control for, but you can optimize around it. The other reason it might be, exactly as we showed through some of those examples, that the SSPs charge very different fees of their publishers, and so it might be that if you are bidding, if you were to be able to, I'm trying to see if I can do the backwards maths on that equation. But if you were able to win an impression by bidding $3.80 through an SSP that was taking a small amount, if you then put a bid in at $5 through another SSP in order to win that impression, that would have a big impact in terms of the medium dollar value you've had to invest to win that impression. And so if you were then tracking that through to some kind of performance objective, a click, a completed view, a conversion, then that would impact the cost for that action. And so the optimizing to that combination of publisher SSP path is really crucial. Oh, I love how this ties together, to save you cost and to improve your performance. What a great question to end on, because I've come back through the subject line of the topic of today's conversation.
Wonderful. Well, that is a great place to end. I want to thank all of you for tuning in and those who asked questions. And if there were those that required a little bit more follow-up, we'll be sure to reach out to you with the correct person. And Cadi, I want to thank you for walking us through this interesting topic. I learned a tremendous lot. I hope you did too. And please join us tomorrow at the same time to learn about logs, how we use them, how to ingest them, cool stuff you can do with them. And you'll hear not just from us, but from a customer who's actually using and putting spend behind them to drive efficiency and performance. So look in the chat and you'll see the link to that, or you can go on our website, beeswax.com/events, to see all our upcoming events, sign up for them, think about them, and then you can join them. So thanks everyone. I hope you're all staying healthy and safe, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.